Hello, everyone. You're on People of the World podcast, and today with me, Akiva Tor, the Israeli ambassador to the Republic of Korea. And first of all, why does it call the Republic of Korea and no South Korea like we know it?
Well, the Republic of Korea it was the country of the entire Korean Peninsula before it was invaded by North Korea, which led to a 3-year war, which has not yet been resolved by a peace treaty. So the formal standpoint of the Republic of Korea is that they're the legal government or the legitimate government of the entire Korean Peninsula. They recognize the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which is North Korea, as an entity with whom they talk and with whom they are interested in reaching a peace treaty, by the way. But nevertheless, Republic of Korea is the name of the country which used to be the government of the entire Korean Peninsula.
Got it.
So it wouldn't be correct to call them South Korea.
Although we call them like that, and I think that most of the
well,
world call them like that.
it's okay to call them South Korea, and it's not considered to be offensive, but it wouldn't be the formal legal name on the passport.
Got it. Okay, that's super interesting, I have to say, because I think that there's. First of all, thanks a lot for participating in here. It's a great pleasure for me to have you here, and congratulations for your role in there. You told me that you're less than a year there, right? You're from November there. So how was your welcoming there during Corona?
Yeah, it's quite interesting because on the one hand, Korea is having a hard time with the vaccination drive. Only less than 5% of the population is vaccinated, and they're not slated to reach herd immunity until perhaps November. But on the other hand, the level of illness and sickness is very, very low. It's a country of 52 million people, and it's rare for infections to be more than 500 a day, and they're testing everyone. When I first got here, I mean, the level of sickness in Korea was 1/50th, 1/50 that of Israel. So on the one hand, they've had a hard time with the vaccines. Japan is also having a similar problem. But on the other hand, they've really handled the disease. So I got to a country where the country is not in lockdown. Restaurants have been open the entire time that I've been there. I was able to go to concerts even in November, December, although they had all kinds of social distancing. And I found a society which is extremely disciplined. They behave according to the rules and the regulations, which is a little bit different than Israel. And
so can you elaborate about this? What's the difference between like Israelis and Koreans, and how can you close this gap in your experience?
Well, look, they're East Asia and we're West Asia. It's really like an East side, West side story where Israel's on literally the western end of the Asian continent, and Korea is part of East Asia, and it's almost the furthest east. Japan is a little bit further east, and there are ways of behavior and Confucianism, Buddhism, spiritual influences, centuries of how peoples behave, and it's characteristic not only of Korea, it's characteristic also of Japan, to a large extent China.
Can you give me an example of this gap that you experienced there, maybe?
Well, for example, my Korean staff in the embassy. So they're incredible people, very skillful, extremely diligent, work very hard, very, very committed to the job, and extremely conscientious. But creativity is not, I mean, it's something that they're certainly capable of, but it's not part of the education system. And they're always telling me how, well, we're working in the Israeli embassy, we have to be more Israeli, which means we have to have more chutzpah. And I say, absolutely, that's completely what we want. But it doesn't come natural. It's a society which is deferential. I mean, by the way, there are a lot of things which are very similar to Israel. For example, the Korean society is very ancient. The uh, the roots of the Korean Republic, of the early Korean Republic, go back to what would be the First Temple period if we were looking at Jewish history. Or it's
Wow.
500, 600, 700 years before BC. They love their language. They're very, very appreciative of their deep culture, the art, calligraphy, literacy. They're very, very family oriented, very, very devoted to parents. And these are all things they like their own cuisine. These are all things which, in many ways, remind me of Israel.
Hmm.
On the other hand, it's a more ordered society. I would say Korea is really a Confucian state. In other words,
Mhm.
if you want to understand the deep logic of the Korean system, you have to read the Confucian Analects. Things are built in an ordered way. Bureaucracy is hard to break through. Um, in Israel, I mean, the other day I had to find something out, and I just called directly the Director General of the Israel Ministry of Health, and he answered the phone,
Mhm.
and we spoke and had a conversation. That would be very, very difficult to do here.
Mhm.
On
Do
the
you think
other
that
hand,
I
it
can?
might be it
Do you
might
think
be
that I
less
can?
necessary to do it here.
Do you think that I can make the same interview with the Korean ambassador to Israel?
I actually think that you could because I know him. He's a very nice guy.
Oh, that's great. So
Uh,
I will take your
and
word for it.
the Korean diplomats are very skillful, and they know where they are. They're sophisticated, and they know that not everywhere is East Asia.
Okay.
Just as Israeli diplomats know that not everywhere is Israel,
Mhm.
and we also have to adapt our behavior to the place where we're at.
Great. So, by the way, you talk about like Korean cuisine. Can you give like some example of what yours, if you have right now, favorite Korean cuisines that you're, I don't know, what your
Well,
favorite
actually,
or.
the Korean cuisine is a huge problem for me because I'm a modern Orthodox and I keep kosher and Shabbat,
Mhm.
and pretty much the Korean cuisine is everything which is forbidden in Leviticus 23.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's quite a challenge there for you.
Yes, they eat a lot of pork and a
Mhm.
lot of octopus,
Got it.
and sometimes shrimp and sometimes squid. And I have not
No
tasted
vegans?
these
There
things.
is no vegans in South
Well,
Korea?
there's temple food. In other words, Buddhism exists in Korea. About a third of the Korean population is Buddhist, but they're oftentimes not strict Buddhists. So
Mm.
they're not vegetarian Buddhists. So there's not there are vegetarian restaurants, but not a huge amount. I served in Taiwan in the 90s, and that was a more Buddhist country, and there were more vegetarian possibilities. But as an ambassador, I'm pretty well taken care of. I mean, I have a residence which belongs to the state of Israel, and
Mhm.
we have a kitchen staff, so I'm doing fine.
Mhm.
And I was able also to locate kosher meat, a number of sources here in Korea, and but I haven't partaken a lot of the cuisine, which I hear from my staff,
Mhm.
which is not kosher observant, that it's excellent.
Okay, that's interesting. I wonder. I mean, that's more like a general question, but I wonder what is your take on this? What do you think is the current role of an ambassador? Because we live in a pretty much connected time era, even, and I wonder how does it affect, if it's affect the role of ambassadors in general, and if you can be more specific, because I think that South Korea is pretty connected, and also Israel, for every sense of communication. So I wonder what's your perception of this.
But it's a good question, but it actually answering the question is the exact reason why I wanted to come to a country like Korea. Uh, Korea is a country with there are huge huge worth for Israel, And Israel can also offer a lot to Korea. I'll just elaborate briefly. Sometimes, I hear ambassadors here oftentimes saying, oh, there's a synergy between our national economy and the Korean economy. And frankly, they're just talking blah, blah. It's not correct.
Okay.
But there actually is a true synergy between the Israeli economy and the Korean economy. We're a smaller country. We're a fifth the size of Korea. Israel's an innovation powerhouse, but we're not strong in manufacturing, and we really can't be strong in manufacturing
Because of the
because
size.
Israel is too small, and we don't have the room for heavy factories which are going to produce tens of thousands of automobiles and produce steel, so on and so forth. Korea is large enough for it, and Korea is brilliant at manufacturing, brilliant at global marketing, but not very strong in technological innovation.
Okay, that's interesting.
So we really, really have what to offer each other. And you see it in, for example, Samsung has a strong presence in Israel. Some of the other Korean conglomerates, they all have a presence in Israel. In my opinion, not enough.
Mhm.
That's where my job comes in.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it's true. We're in a modern world. Korea is hyper connected. Korea is 5G. There's Wi Fi everywhere. Israel is also very connected. It's not a problem for the president of Korea to call the Israeli prime minister or for the foreign ministers to speak directly. But the point is that they won't, or they won't do it naturally. It's out of sight, out of mind. They're here and we're there. And that's why it's important to have a national office that can, I'm here to look out for the Israeli interest, to advance the Israeli national interest here, and to try and to do it in a way that also meets, I'll only be successful if I'm also meeting real needs of Korea. But my presence, the presence of my staff, the fact that we're working here, that we're trying to make as much noise, positive noise as we can, we are making things happen that wouldn't otherwise happen.
Can you give me an example for this?
An example. What is my job? For example, I will not have succeeded in my job if I do not bring about a presidential visit by the president of Korea to the state of Israel. 2 Israeli presidents have visited Korea, Shimon Peres and Reuven Rivlin. There is never, in 60 years of relations, there has never been a visit by the Korean head of state to Israel. There are reasons for it. I think the reasons have to do with kind of being risk averse, worrying about how some Arab states might react to it. The Abraham Accords have not fully sunk in yet, but this is something that um, a proactive diplomacy can bring about. The problem's not structural; it's behavioral.
Mhm.
Therefore, if I work the right way, we'll make it happen. We have an economic attaché, Yaniv Goldberg from the from Israel Ministry of Economic Affairs, and we work very close together. And we need to convince the major Korean conglomerates to open research and development centers in Israel. Samsung has one, but SK, LG, Hyundai Motors, they don't. And if we do our work the right way, we can find the way to get the senior leadership of these organizations. We can get their attention,
You talk
and
about.
that's the job of an embassy today.
Can you be more specific about the behavioral obstacles? I'm guessing that you are. I mean, is it like more of a political pressure that there are or on the Korean government to not visit Israel? Is there something else that we're maybe under the radar that why is not being more? I would say war. I mean, because I know that the relation between Israel and Korea are pretty warm, right? It's like full diplomatic relation. We're export and import, but
They are warm. They are
Mhm.
warm. At the same time, Korea also has diplomatic relations with Iran.
Hmm.
The Korean prime minister, who's not the head of state, it's the prime minister in the presidential system. Prime minister is lower than the senior ministers, but he led an economic delegation to Tehran not a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, Korea is looking at the Middle East, and Korea does not have petroleum, and they need sources of oil. So they're also, a Korean ship was captured by the Iranian National Guard and was held for 3 months for absolutely no reason in an Iranian port. So the Koreans are thinking about the fact that they need to maintain their freedom of navigation in the Straits of Hormuz, and they don't want to get caught up in our problems. They have also certain issues that we don't want to get in the middle of. Korea and Japan are in a very deep feud about the history of the Second World War, and not only that, and Israel, we would really try not to get in the middle of that argument, even though Koreans have some very strong things to say. But I think that the major issue is that at the end of the day, modern nation states are not run by AI. They're run by people.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, they still have the limitations of human biology, which means there's a limited attention span that the head of state and that the senior ministers have.
Mm-hmm.
And Korea is another point in which it's similar to Israel is they're very, very self-involved, and they're very, very much, very, very internally political.
Mm-hmm.
As in Israel, we're talking all about, we're driving ourselves crazy about how we're going to form a government and what that government is going to be.
Yeah.
The Koreans have kind of similar kinds of internal debates with themselves. So what I'm trying to say is that Israel doesn't pop up into the Korean consciousness immediately. The Korean foreign minister, the Korean minister of defense doesn't say, oh, I must go to Israel tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
And nor does that happen on the Israeli side. And that's the job of a diplomat, to say, hey, come, I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, we're going to have, in less than 2 weeks from now, we're going to have a very senior ministerial delegation from Israel. Our foreign minister, Gabi Ashkenazi, together with the Minister of Economic Affairs, Amir Peretz,
Mm-hmm.
are coming to Korea approximately May 11th and 12th approximately,
Mm-hmm.
to sign a free trade agreement.
Oh.
And this will actually be Israel's first free trade agreement with any Asian country. And it will be Korea's first free trade agreement with any Middle Eastern country.
Wow.
So that's good.
That's great. So by the way, I know it's like a little bit a general question again, but what is the perception of Korean of Israel or about Israelis? I mean,
Israel is a very strong brand in Korea.
mm-hmm.
And by the way, I think Korea is also a very strong brand in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
I was in home leave for Pesach, where when I got my vaccinations, and also my kids are all in Israel, so I got to see everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I met all kinds of partners, heads of major museums in Israel, also business people. Everyone wants to do something with Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And the same thing is true in Korea. Koreans are very interested in Israel. They've heard a lot about Israel. Right at this moment, there are 2 Korean television crews in Israel covering the whole vaccination story.
Wow.
They believe that we're a hugely successful and united country. It's oftentimes heartwarming to hear them talk about us. And they see Israel as a huge success, a small country that through ingenuity and through the internal unity of its people has managed to withstand incredible odds. To a certain extent, it's not untrue about Korea as well. The Republic of Korea, or South Korea, was an extremely poor country at the end of the Korean War in 1953. It was a level of poverty which was greater than the poverty of Israel in the early 50s. Even though Israel was in an extremely difficult economic situation, it wasn't the same. There was hunger in Korea, and through hard work, through very difficult policy of industrialization, they became a wealthy country,
Hmm.
and they're proud of this accomplishment. But they also see it in us. They're also aware that we're a country with really no resources, and
So
we
it's a little
came
bit
from very
parallel,
little.
right? In a way, we go in some way
There,
in the
there
same
are there are a
directions in
lot.
that
I
sense.
mean, there's the story of Korea and Israel are similarities and differences.
Hmm. But I wonder. I mean, there's in my eyes, there's a big maybe cultural gap, and of course, like language gap between Israel and the entire East Asia area. So I wonder if it's not like a big problem that it's really hard to make business with, or to even like
Well,
cultural
that's true.
connection,
That's
whatever,
true.
politically and even.
It's a Korean problem. It's not only a Korean problem. It's an entire East Asian
Yeah.
problem. There's difficulties with English.
Hmm.
First of all, Israelis managed to learn English,
Yeah, sure,
and,
but not
and
Japanese and Koreans. So I wonder how can
they
we.
learn English. They learn English in school, but they're oftentimes afraid to speak, afraid to make mistakes.
Oh.
Is it's a cultural element. I also think that they have a pedagogical problem with this. I also served in Taiwan, and I saw the same problem. The way the teaching of the language was very much book teaching, and therefore you'll find oftentimes that I'll be dealing even with senior Koreans in government, and if we have a conversation, it will go through a translator. But if it's emails, they can write English perfectly,
Oh, so it's more.
better than the average Israeli. So that
m-
that happens as well. But nevertheless, it creates certain difficulty in communication. Although
mhm.
there's plenty of Koreans that are speaking English perfectly, and I find I'm able to get along and to work very well. But there's differences in the way we do things. They're more ordered, more bureaucratic,
And I think that's
less
more delicate, right? You said it between the lines. I think that they're more.
delicate. No, I don't think.
No,
No, Koreans are not delicate.
really,
They're
no,
just
because it's
like us. They're just like
really.
us. Yeah, they can be harsh. They can be harsh.
Okay, again, if you can give me some examples of what you like, see when you've been there. I mean, in that
But
sense.
they're polite. They're not rude.
Oh, okay. So we're not polite, maybe. The Israelis are not that polite.
Well,
Or
look, I love Israel, and I love Israelis, and I love Israelism.
of course.
But sometimes our openness and bluntness is perceived as rude.
Hmm.
And even though we don't mean that,
Yeah, sure.
on
Just straightforward,
the
Dugli.
Korean tendency is not to be like that.
Hmm.
It's much more reticent. It's much more reserved. No one talks in the elevator. Okay, do I
Oh,
like that? I don't like that. I don't like that. It troubles me that no one talks in the elevator,
what about
but
like
they don't
horning?
talk in the elevator.
Horning in the cars. What about that? Do you use
Well,
the
what?
horn in the car? Do you use the?
Not so bad. I
But
mean,
is because in Israel it's a
if
nightmare in that
you
sense.
if you if you don't if they don't like people cutting in,
Hmm.
um, they can be fairly aggressive on the road. Uh, I don't see as many people speeding
Mm.
like in Israel.
Hmm. So I wonder again about this.
Oh, but there is a big difference.
Uh-huh.
For
Yeah, yeah.
example, you don't see Tarantot. You don't
Like
see
an old vehicles.
old beat up cars
Okay.
puffing out black smoke.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You don't see that on the Korean highways, and
Hmm.
that's because a Korean will not be caught dead in such a car.
Hmm. Got it.
It's not because of motor vehicle regulations. The
Hmm.
Koreans they they like name brands, and they like things that look nice.
What do you think?
It's a different aesthetic.
Okay, but what do you think is the main issues that bother the general Korean, or even what do you think that the main issues that.
Well, I know about this. Yeah, I talked to my staff. I have a young staff. Some of them have young children. Some of them are not married yet. Korea's got a big problem with fertility.
Oh.
They're they have negative population growth. I think Korea's actually lowest population growth in the world, even less than Japan right now.
Mhm.
My question is why? And I think the reason is that despite the fact that the country is wealthy and doing well, they just posted their, by the way, economic indicators. The performance of the Korean economy right now is better than it was before COVID. Even
Wow.
not having come out of COVID, yeah, the GDP is higher, it's growing. And people have money, and when it's possible to travel, people travel around the world. Koreans love to travel, and yet life is considered to be hard.
Hard
Apartments are
in what
very
sense do you
expensive.
mean? Hard in
Apartments are
like,
very expensive.
got
The
it.
average price of an apartment in Seoul is $1 million.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
To rent, you have to pay a very high level of key money. It has a special name,
Hmm.
but you have to deposit more than $100,000 with the
Like in
landlord
advance.
that just holds it
Hmm. Got it.
while you're renting. School is very tough.
So you
The
see a
kids, they
connection
go to
between
school and then they go to cram school afterwards.
so you see a
And
connection between this and the fertility rate?
I think it causes people to some people are sometimes thinking, well, what does it mean to bring a child into the world? It means that you have to help them succeed in this education system. They have to get these very special grades in order to get into the top universities. Only if they get into those top universities will they get the kind of jobs that they need in order to be able to afford everything they want. There's a real sense of competition and pressure.
Hmm.
Uh, very much the opposite of how youth in Israel feel. In Israel's like people sometimes say Israel is the best place in the world to be a kid.
Israel.
Yeah, I think in many ways it's true. I
Yeah,
mean,
I
I
would say
see the way
also.
my daughter is
Hmm.
in high school. I mean,
Flourish.
she had a wonderful life. She learned something as well in school, but she didn't let school get in the way of life.
So what do you mean?
And
How do you see this
here it's
pressure?
here in Korea, it's all consuming. It's all
Everything.
consuming.
Like it's everything is to be the best or to be more
So
competitive.
yeah, so a parent says to themselves, well, I should have one, maximum two children because I have to pay for private school lessons and I have to make sure they do this and I have to send them abroad to learn English and I have to do this and I have to do that. And I, I think it's affecting, their ability to grow. Look, also the country it's crowded. It's not a large country.
Mhm.
Um, it's very outside. It's very mountainous outside of the cities, but the cities are very very urban and quite congested.
Mhm.
And I think it's a national problem for Korea that people feel this way.
But do you think that the Koreans are concerning in their private life about this, or it's just like a governmental issue or a social issue? I mean, does people think to
I think
themselves?
I think it's very. Look, I'm not a psychologist or a
Mhm.
professional sociologist of the Korean society, but from what I can see so far, from the period I've been here, I see a society which, again, they on the one hand love their language, appreciative of their alphabet and how it was made. The Korean alphabet was created by King Sejong in the 14th century in order to encourage literacy.
Mhm.
In other words, he abandoned the system of Chinese ideograms in favor of in favor of an alphabet, a vowelized alphabet, so that it wouldn't only be the scholarly class that would be able to learn how to read, but also people would learn how to read.
I,
And
I wonder how do you if you see like some correlation or maybe some way that Israel will because it's again fertility rates if you compare it to Israel it's like a different scale, you know, we're like
here
I think
we're,
one of
we're,
the
we're on the opposite
yeah
ends. We're on the
totally
opposite ends.
so I'm wonder if you see because again you see some connection or some similarity between Israelis and Korean, right? We're like the startup nation. We really like want to achieve more, and but it seems that the Korean takes a different, maybe even like corrosive path in that sense. You know, they work. I mean, tirelessly to be even you know even to that affects their personal life. I'm guessing so. Do you
Look,
think that?
they work terribly hard.
Mhm.
They work terribly, terribly hard. They work very, very long hours. The legal work week is 52 hours a week.
Wow.
There are a lot of times there are in certain professions there's expectations of people to go out, and to entertain together. Um, Israelis, by the way, also work very hard. Israel is
Yeah.
a very hard working country. And
So
by the
I'm
way, I
asking,
know Israel.
do you think
I
that
mean,
there is a chance that Israel will take the same path in that sense? I mean, or go, or will, I mean, I just, just thinking
I,
maybe because
I think, look,
there are some similarities.
I think our national characters are very, very different,
Mm,
really.
mhm.
Uh, and I mean, there are again, there are many similarities, and there are a lot of reasons for us to find interest in each other.
Mhm.
But we're quite different. At the end of the day, I think Israelis, we want our kids to have a good childhood, to be
To
to
be
be
happy,
free. What?
to be happy,
I
I'm
think
guessing.
to be happy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think Israelis are happier.
Okay, so that's
And
super interesting, I
and
have to say. By the way,
yeah,
you mentioned that your family is stays in Israel, right?
right now my family is in Israel, including my wife. My wife will join me in September.
Hmm.
Uh, but the I have two kids in high school. My son is in the IDF, and a daughter who just is finishing high school,
Hmm.
and will go for a year of midrashah before she begins her IDF service. But yeah, that by the way, that is a great difficulty in diplomacy. It's that families are not mobile in the way that they once were.
Hmm.
I served in three other postings, and all of them my family came with me.
So how is it? I mean, I wonder how does it affect like the I'm guessing your experience there because it's pretty like it's like a pretty far from home. I'm guessing.
What's causing me to work too hard,
Okay.
because I come home, and instead of talking to my wife like a normal person, I continue working.
Hmm.
So
Maybe, maybe it's like the Korean experience in that sense. It's a little bit. So okay, so I
maybe a
really
little bit.
okay.
But
So
yeah,
mhm,
but WhatsApp really, really helps. I mean,
mm,
because I speak to my family members all the time, and it's
mhm.
unlimited, and but yeah, it's a difficulty. It's not easy.
Okay, but well, you talk about this. We're talking about this connection to Israel and this connectivity between nations. Do you think that we will see a better connection between Israelis and Korean, not like diplomacy, not like business, in more like a human or friendship way between Israelis and Korean?
Well,
Because
I think that
is it
there's
possible
plenty
that
of
we
I
will
think
have?
there's plenty of room for that, and
Mhm,
we're working on. First of all, there's we have a huge asset here as an Israeli embassy working here, and that is that a third of the population is Christian,
mhm.
and that's about 10% Catholic and 25% Protestant, devout Protestant. It's interesting. It's not exactly American evangelical Christianity. It's actually Methodists and Presbyterians, but before the revolution in those churches in the United States. They're still very, very conservative and extremely pro-Israel and interested in Israel, interested in the Bible, the Old Testament, and interested in the Holy Land.
Mhm.
So this is something I mean, as soon as we can open an air corridor with Korea, we want to renew tourism. There were 60,000 Korean tourists a year
Mhm.
before COVID, and it was growing by leaps and bounds all the time. We need to get back to that.
Mhm.
We also had direct flights through Korea Airlines. So that's one element, simply people coming over. The Korean K drama is becoming, it's like it's all over the place, and
Like
including in
K-pop,
Israel.
I would say, right?
And there's also the K-pop.
Mhm.
And this is something I'm actually looking to make a connection between Israel and Korea. I mean, if we could find a way to bring about a Korea Israel co-production of a successful K drama, that
Oh,
would be
wow.
that would be that would be great.
Yes.
And yeah, well, it's something I'm working on, but I don't want to talk about it so much in the podcast. It's I mean, I'm not, I'm doing it as government, but we've got some ideas and we're working with a number of people to try to make it happen. And we would also like to bring about a connection between relevant Israeli artists, musical artists, and the K-pop scene here.
Is there like Koreans know about like Israeli culture? I don't know, Israeli films.
Not about that less. About that less.
Because I think that we know
But
more about their music, right? Maybe because it's much more.
They don't know Ehud Banai, and but there's, I mean, there's no reason why they should know Netta, for example. But
oh wow, okay.
But look, the Koreans, the K-pop scene is very much a Korean K-pop scene. They have BDS and they have Blackpink and they've and their thing. The question is if we can connect with it. And
I think we're quite the opposite. I think it's usually quite like K-pop, right? If I'm not mistaken, for example.
What, Israelis?
More than like the usual, not like
Well,
American
I don't know.
pop,
There's a certain sector of Israeli young people who like K-pop.
No, but I wonder, do you think that like Israeli art can be, or art or music or film can be successful in Korea? Are they open to this kind of I don't know, foreign art form? Or I don't know.
Let's put it this way: Shtisel is on Netflix here.
Okay.
I don't know if it's going to break through, but it is on Netflix here, and there are people here who've heard of Fauda, and they know Gal Gadot, and
okay, like the rest.
Israel, I mean, look, there's also been a number of Israeli novels that have been translated into Korean. Amos Oz, Etgar Keret, Aleph Bet Yoshua as well. But I wouldn't say that we're in the mainstream of the Korean culture. But again, we're a strong brand. They have some misconceptions about Israel, some very nice misconceptions about Israel.
Come on, share it with me. I wonder what it's.
They believe that we're all Talmud scholars.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow. So
yes.
What's every one of us? So
they
think that
Israel is
like
all Talmud scholars, and this is why we're so intelligent.
So they don't see us as a secular state.
Well, they see Talmud as a book of tremendous wisdom and insight. I don't know if they necessarily connect it to a metaphysical outlook.
Wow, this is super interesting. Okay, what else? What are the other perceptions do they have? Like nice perception, nice perception?
They don't make in the common Korean perception. They don't make a real difference between Israel and the Jewish people.
Okay. So like the Arab minority is not considered as part of the.
Well, it's not that they're against it; they're just not aware of it. They're not aware of it. My deputy, the deputy ambassador of Israel in the Republic of Korea, is a Israeli Arab Muslim woman, and we certainly, Rasha Tamna, we certainly never hide this in any way, but. They have they have certain perceptions of Jews, which are also perceptions of Israel, and so it's something which is very common throughout East Asia. There are sometimes perceptions of the Jewish people that we would normally consider them anti-Semitic, but they're understood as philo-Semitic. Jews are very good. Jews are very powerful. Jews are very good with finance. Jews are able to accomplish this. They're able to accomplish that, and worthy of all respect. So I'm not saying that
it's a misconception. It's
but these are attitudes which are shared through, I think, in large parts of East Asia, and it's kind of sort of like a positive stereotype of Jews. Which isn't always grounded in harsh reality.
By the way, you talked about like the languages, and I see some, and also I think you mentioned that there are some similarities between like the Israeli alphabet and the Korean language. So I wonder if there is another, in that sense, maybe respect for the language. We call ourselves like the Israeli, like the Am HaSefer,
People of the book.
the people of the book. So do you think that there, maybe in that sense, there can be like a more like interesting connection between, like, we respect the language in much more deeper way, or in that sense, maybe? You said that also they really
think,
like that.
again, I think the connection to the land of Israel, the connection to the Bible, the connection to it's a very, very, very strong card for us here in Korea.
Mm-hmm.
The Korean president is a Catholic. The Korean National Security Advisor is a devout Christian. There's an interest. There's a Protestant and a natural Christian interest in the story of the Jews and the people of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that we need to use all the time, and that we need to build on. But but it is true that we're distant and far apart, and we're a little bit out of each other's minds.
Yeah, totally.
And that's where my work comes in.
So if I understand, you want to achieve like a better connection, right, between the Israel. That's what your main
I would
goal.
say, I would describe it this way: I want a deeper engagement politically and economically between the state of Israel and the Republic of Korea.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the tools by which we will do this is a very powerful and energetic public diplomacy program. We're running, an Israeli embassy is never going to be one of the largest embassies in any country. We're a country of 9.3 million. I can't compete in terms of resource, surely not with the US Embassy, but also not with the German, French, or UK Embassy.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also going to have some problems against the Europeans, because every European country's got two embassies. They have their own embassy and they have the European Union embassy. So the Israeli embassy has to be very proactive, and we have to make a lot of noise.
Okay.
And good noise.
We know how to make noise, we're Israelis. We're pretty
we
noisy.
have a very, very active social media program. And I would encourage I hope that you'll look us up. Where we have, our platforms are called Israel in Korea, or Akiva Tor, which is my Twitter account and Facebook, where those are work accounts, and we talk about everything that we're doing and trying to move forward. And everything that we post is posted in English and in Korean. There's, so we're doing that, and I'm going to be giving a series of lectures about Talmud, because
Great,
that's
because all of us are Talmud scholars. Or
we're signing a free trade agreement. We're producing. There are 85 Korean students in Hebrew University learning Hebrew in Rothberg, and we're running a whole program with them. We're going to produce videos in Korean, and we're as active as we can. Next week, I'm hosting an iftar for the Muslim diplomats here in Korea. So it's all if we want to get our job done, we have to work 3 times as hard.
Sure. By the way, do you speak any Korean?
And smart. What?
But do you speak any Korean? Do you have like a
very
favorite?
little? I've been taking Korean lessons. 안녕하세요, 안녕하십니까, 감사합니다. These are just pet phrases. I can read the alphabet, but
do you have any favorite word or any favorite phrase that you like?
Well, the interesting thing is that anio means no and ne means yes, which is very confusing.
Yes. By the way, do you find any similarity between like Hebrew words and Korean words?
Only one. That's the word for mother.
Which is?
In Hebrew, ima, and there it's imea. It's similar. Cool. But that's probably like mother. That's probably sort of like a universal thing that has to do with the way babies make noises.
Yeah.
There isn't a lot. Korean is a difficult language. It's one of the most difficult languages for Westerners to learn. Mm-hmm. And I have to make a decision now. I'm exactly at the point where I have to decide whether I'm I'm going to invest a lot of time in trying to learn the language, or if I'm going to accept the fact that I'll never be fluent in it, and therefore maybe I should invest in other things. I hope that I don't make the second decision. I hope that I don't give up on acquiring ability to converse in Korean.
But can you share any Korean wisdom that you stumble upon during your service there? Something, word of wisdom, or I don't know, way to.
They're very wise.
I know, that's the thing. I know that. So I don't know, something that maybe your staff members teach you or told you. This is.
Well, I would say that one thing that they're teaching me all the time is try very hard not to give offense.
Great.
Now, by the way, I don't always agree with this.
Because you're Israeli.
But you have to admit there's something to it.
Yeah, sure. Great. And let's just go to conclusion. Where do you see the Israeli-Korean relation in like 5 or even 10 years from now?
Well, I'll tell you. I'll say what my aspirations are.
Is it going to be better? You think that we're going to
trade, our mutual trade by now at present is 2.5 billion a year, and we need to triple that.
In 5 years, you think it's possible?
5 to 10 years. We need it to be a lot more.
And you think that it's possible? Do you think that there is like in Israel and in Korea, that you think that there is the system that will support this?
Well, what I think is I think it would make a lot of sense for the Korean high-tech conglomerates to be investing much more in Israeli operations. That would put a lot of money into Israel. That would put a lot of money into our research infrastructure. That would take Israeli innovation and put it into Korean products, which are marketed all over the world. There's very interesting things happening here cutting edge things happening in terms of the creation of vehicles. The Korean automakers are working very hard in developing the next phase of EV, electric vehicles.
Because they don't like Tarantos, because they don't like
they don't like Taranto, but they're also really forward thinking. They're the battery technology, the issues of mobility, how to do smart transportation, and we need to get as much of Israel into those vehicles as possible because they're going to sell all over the world.
What do you mean as much as Israel in these vehicles? In what sense? Like to buy them?
Because we have quite a lot of startups in Israel.
Oh, Israeli technology in those cars,
smart
you mean?
Transportation and smart mobility and.
You mean Israeli technologies inside?
Yes,
those
Israeli
vehicles.
technology. That's what I mean.
Okay, great.
That's what I mean.
So, and in your eyes, it's possible to make a better connection or more fruitful connection between Israel and Korea in the foreseeable future.
I don't see structural. I don't see obstructions that are structural. I have to admit I'm still learning the job, and I don't want to display bluster and false optimism. But I think that we can do a lot.
Great. So in this great word,
there's another good thing here is they have baseball here.
Wow. Okay, that's great for Americans, I'm guessing. If you're American, so it's great, right?
It's great for me because I love baseball.
Okay, that's amazing.
I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, and
how's their league? Is it great?
It's very competitive, very, very competitive.
Right. If you compare it to the American League, is it like?
Well, they're named after corporations. So you have like the Doosan Bears and the LG Tigers and the Lota World Center, this and that, and the. So
when's the last time? Weird. When's the last time that you've been in a Korean baseball game?
I haven't been because when I got here, the season was winding down, and it wasn't possible to go to games.
Oh, not because of COVID.
But now the season has started, and I haven't been yet, but I'm going.
And it's open. Everything is open.
My public diplomacy person is trying to arrange for me to throw out the opening pitch.
Wow, that's a huge honor. Wow. So everything is open. Everything is open. I'm guessing, right? in that sense? It's not, COVID is over
It's
basically in Korea.
it's open, but not completely. Everyone's wearing masks.
Mm,
Everyone's wearing masks, and the seating at sports events is limited.
mm.
But it does take place. The stadiums aren't empty.
Do you have any favorite team that you're looking?
Not yet. Not yet.
Not yet,
And
but
if I did, I wouldn't say because it
yes,
would
it
get
would.
me in trouble.
Yes, totally. Like any place, I'm guessing, right? You can't share the team that you like, right?
Well,
As a diploma,
I
as a
want look.
diplomat.
I want people to welcome me here, and I mean, it's like
You don't want to step on any toes,
Israeli New
right? You
York.
don't want to step on
The
any toes.
Israeli Consul General in New York City can be a Yankees fan or a Mets fan or both a Yankees and a Mets fan. Okay,
Mhm.
but the Israeli ambassador in the United States cannot be, because what's going to happen when he visits Boston or she visits California?
Yes. That's a political issue right there, right? It's a diplomatic event, I'm guessing. So anyway, so thanks a lot again. Thanks a lot for participating
It's
in
my
this.
pleasure,
Yes.
Sinai, and thank you very much for doing this.
And how can I greet you for goodbye in Korean?
You should say, uh, oh, you should say Desene
Desene.
Tor
Desene.
Gamsamnida, which means Ambassador Tor, thank you very much.
Desene.
Desene Tor
Desene tu.
Gamsamnida.
Sam.
Gamsahamnida.
Dam sahamnida.
Desene, Desene Tor Gamsahamnida.
Desene tu gam sahamnida.
Exactly.
Great.
Yes.
Great. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Thank you.